Welcome to Real GM Radio. I'm Wes Goldberg. Matt Moore from the Action Network is here, and today we're drafting our favorite win total over-unders for the regular season. Let's jump in. Today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. So, Matt, preseason basketball has started. Real games that matter are around the corner. And today we're looking ahead to the regular season by drafting our favorite win total over-unders for the season. But before we get to that, Matt, we've been watching some preseason basketball. Has anything stood out to you so far? Something overlooked that people aren't talking about enough? Or maybe something that has been looked at a lot, talked about enough, but maybe people are talking about the wrong way?
I think the Pistons look like they have better process. I think if you're watching those Pistons game, and especially like I subjected myself to a Clockwork Orange like process of watching Pistons offense over the summer, and if you compare that to how they look now, it's night and day. All five guys touching the ball. Cade not testing out, like trying to beat some of the whoever the best defender on the other team is. Ivy looks more polished, but it's not just about like how good are you. It's more that the offense is like, hey, let's run a pick and roll, and then let's reverse it to the weak side for a corner three. Hey, we've generated an extra cut underneath the basket out of reset on the pick and roll on an L pass, and there's actually an open guy under the basket. Like those little things with how bad Detroit's offense has been the last two seasons, I think can make a really big impact. I thought Houston, it's going to be very hard not to get wrapped up in Houston hype because all the kids look so good. Yeah. Like, it's just like the endless parade. Amen Thompson looks like he leveled up. Reed Shepherd looks good to go. Jalen Green looks like the March version. Like, it's just going to be very hard to resist buying in on, I think, the Houston hype. I'm going to try and curtail myself. And then OKC, like there was a sequence where Hartenstein makes like a over the back pass to Caruso for a bucket. And it's like these little sequences where you're just like, God, they have so much talent. There's nothing so far in preseason that's like warning me off of OKC and the hype that's around them, which, I'm looking for reasons to kind of curtail my abundance of optimism about OKC. And there's just none of it. They look like they're going to be awesome.
Houston, OKC, both of those teams will probably come up in our over-unders today, maybe. I would imagine at least OKC. But I'm so glad you mentioned the Detroit Pistons. Of those three teams, I don't think you probably were thinking, yeah, I'm so glad that you mentioned the Pistons. But I, for some reason, watched both Pistons preseason games. And I'm with you. I'm like, hey, JB Bickerstaff's really got something going on here. I like Jaden Ivey being on the ball more. Cade Cunningham working off the ball a little bit more. I don't know that they're going to hit their over-under this year. They still have a ways to go. But Cade's struggles in the first two preseason games aren't great. He's missed 13 of his 19 shots. He kind of looks slow. I'm not really sure, but I do think the process in Detroit is a lot better than what it used to be, and maybe those other guys can help lift him up. But let's just jump into what we're doing here today. We're going to draft the over-under win totals. We're going to be choosing them in order of how confident we are that that over-under is going to hit. We're not going to get to all 30 teams today, but we're going to try to get to as many as we can here. Matt, you're the guest. I'll give you the first pick.
Okay, let's take the Utah Jazz under 29.5. There's a 29.5 in the market. This is when I came to late, where I wanted very much. I always kind of like lean positively on the Jazz. I've loved Markkanen since he was a Chicago Bull back in the day. Thought he was underutilized then, and when he went to Cleveland and it worked, I was like, see. And then he went to Utah and made another leap, and I'm like, see. I love Will Hardy. Seems like a really good coach. Colin Sexton had like a sneaky great year last year. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets traded somewhere and has a big impact this season, or at least has an impact this season on a team that's winning. But, look, I'm somebody that's watching Detroit Pistons tape, and I'm somebody that's like, like Bryce McGowan is like underrated. Like that's the kind of thing that I get into. And my wife the other day was like, well, who's good on the Jazz? And I was like, well, Markkanen. And she's like, who else? I was like, well, Clarkson, but he's probably getting traded. She's like, who else? I was like, Sexton, but he's probably getting traded. She's like, who else? And I was like, Keyshawn George. And she's like, who else? And I was like, I don't know, because Kessler might be in the doghouse again. The roster, I think, is just bare. And also, a big thing I think to keep in mind when you're doing these kind of projections is that you really do have to decide whether or not this team is looking to win. And from the people that I've spoken to, not in the Jazz, because the Jazz would never be like that, nor would they speak to me, but the people I've talked to around the league, there's like oh no, they're not. No, they don't want to win. They would be very happy pairing Cooper Flagg with Lauri Markkanen. Now they can't trade Markkanen because they extended him, but No reason not to shut down marketing by January and go ahead and coast out. So this to me, with a number as high as this at 29.5 still in the market, is a very easy under.
This is a bananas number.
Yeah.
They won 31 games last year. Cleaning the Glass had them at a 28 expected win percentage, so or expected win total there. So giving them 28 is already under their expected win total from last year. Giving them 28 and a half, 29 and a half, whatever you had it as. They're probably going to go lower. And you're absolutely right. When I look at these totals, when I'm looking at teams at the upper end, like that are going to win a lot of games, the number one thing I'm looking at is health. Do I expect that team to be healthy? That's the number one driver in terms of teams winning a bunch of games in the regular season. For teams that are going to go under 30 wins, a lot of those teams want to go under 30 wins. Like there's not a whole lot of teams anymore that are like thinking they're going to win 42 games and it turns out that they win 25. You know, teams that are going to win fewer than 30 games kind of know and they've planned for it. I think Utah definitely fits that. The fact that they're already nobody would say that they're shopping Walker Kessler, but why do we keep hearing that they're not trading Walker Kessler? That's like the Danny Ainge special, right? We're not trading this guy, which means, hey, we're listening to offers on this guy. So it seems like it's only a matter of time before some of these guys get moved. So that's a great one. Wasn't expecting you to go under, but that's probably the right move to start things off. You already mentioned my number one pick, OKC. I'm going to take them off the board right now, 56.5 wins. I'm going the over on that. And that it goes back to my point of health. This team is so young. They're so deep. They were super healthy last year, and won 57 games. I think they got better with Alex Caruso and Isaiah Hartenstein. I think internally they're only going to get better. Another year of Chet Holmgren, another year of Jalen Williams, another year SGA. All these guys, Mark Dagnall's there and solidified. I just think that this team, you also look at it, they're built to win a lot of games. They have a lot of ways that they can score. They have a lot of ways they can defend. They can play 48 minutes with basically five like great, not even just above the average or average defenders, like five great defenders on the floor at all times. I just think they're going to be a regular season wins machine. I was a little surprised that I was the most confident of all the teams that I had here on them going over, considering that the West is so loaded. I just think that they're going to stack wins, and so I'm taking OKC off the board here.
So I respect it. I think here's the key. If you're basketball side, this is a great play. Like there's just it's like I have them. I am embarrassed by how high I have them projected. Like it is legitimately like, oh no, because like I have this team projected at 63 wins. Yep. And that's a lot of wins for a team this young. And so like I'm very high on them. I bet this number when it first came out a little bit lower, a touch lower. There was actually before they signed Hartenstein, there was a division bet that I put in on them, which was a great number. And now it's even a good number at a minus number. I think they're going to win the division by several games. I will just warn you that like this is what the reason I love the gambling side talking so much is you're dealing with, if you remove it from like the talk about like the wise guys or this, that, and the other, it's like, okay, the market is a reflection of public perception. And so if there's hype around a team, they're always going to be a little exaggerated. And I will just warn you with this one, the top three teams since 2011, I got data going back to 2011, top three teams in win total. So if you have one of the three highest, 27 and 14 to the under. There was one that tied there. So what this kind of shows you is winning 50 plus games is really tough. And it's harder than I think that we make it out to be. Like most people are like, oh yeah, they should win. Like there's so many teams like, yeah, they should win 50 games. And a lot of teams do win 50 games, but it's not as often the ones that we think.
Right.
And so like, that's a reason to kind of be cautious on it. But from a basketball perspective, I'm with you. I think that when you go through the numbers, you're just like, all right, if Shea gets hurt, oh no, Casey Wallace, Alex Caruso, and Lou Dort next to Chet Holmgren are going to have to anchor in defense for a month.
Right.
Jalen Williams is the lead offensive player. Oh no, Chet Holmgren's out. Good thing they have Isaiah Hartenstein. Like they have redundancy and flexibility game to game. It's with great coaching. They're a wagon. They're awesome.
You're right, and it's a reason why they're the only team I kind of had in that big that plus 50 win space going over this high on my board, because they're the team that I feel most confident in doing it. But you got the next pick.
Okay, gotta fade the hype here. The New York Knicks under 54 and a half. Look, it's not that I don't think the Knicks are going to be good. And if they win 48 games and they go 3-1 versus the Celtics, are you really going to feel like they're awful if they're a 4 seed? Are you really going to feel like they have no shot of winning the title? No. But when we kind of look at this, they're a team that have kind of confounded expectations already. And then they were already placed higher. at 52.5. They went on a crazy run to end the regular season. And the crazy run that they went on to end the regular season and get past the Sixers, in part because of Joel Embiid's injury, was chemistry and defense. Like, that was the formula, right? These guys all play together. They know each other, the Villanova connection. Well, you messed with that. You add in Mikal Bridges, which changes the dynamic, even if he's one of the Nova guys. And then you go out and you add Cat, which disrupts things. Now, the core Nova guys are still there. I get that. But then we look at like Mikal Bridges. What's he elite at? Okay, he's a floor spacer who's an elite defensive option. It gives them good redundancy, especially versus a team like Boston with OG Anunoby. You got OG Anunoby and Josh Hart and Mikal Bridges. But the question is just like, how much of an upgrade is that? I'm willing to say it's an upgrade, especially with OG's injury history, but that also causes other problems. It's just like, how much of an upgrade is that? You lose Hartenstein, who was statistically one of the most impactful players in the league last season on defense, and he was a monster offensive rebounder. Cat makes them better from a on paper standpoint, but changes the identity of them. And if you give me instability in identity, which was the whole reason they were over last year, that's enough for me to go ahead and fade a number at 54.5. I talked about this with the win totals now on the Thunder. Not only that, but when you're 52.5 or more, that's a key number in win totals. If you're over that mark, the under hits about 60% of the time. So it's a really good bet to take some of these teams, find one that you think that the market has gotten ahead of, and go the other way. The key here is not that I think that the New York Knicks are going to win 41 games. The key is that I don't think they're going to win 55 or more. So I'll take the under on the Knicks at 54.5.
Could not agree more with you. Could not agree more. The 54.5 is a bananas number. It's way too high. 50, 51 wins, I could totally see that. They won 50 games last year. I don't know that they're better as a regular season team. I think they raised their ceiling with these trades, and I think that was the goal of the trades. Hey, we haven't even gotten out of the second round of the playoffs. People act like the Knicks were in the NBA Finals the last 2 years. They haven't been into the Eastern Conference Finals.
Right.
But so to project a team to go to be 5 wins more than they were last year, based on some of the moves they made, you mentioned the chemistry issues too. That's going to be a part of the Knicks story this year. I think the first 10 games of the Knicks schedule aren't easy. Like, it could be clunky right out of the gate as they try to work in Karl Anthony Towns, who got traded there right before media day, and all these things. Like, there's going to be some things to work through. I think they increased their ceiling. I think they raised their ceiling with these trades, but I don't think they're necessarily going to be a better regular season win team this year. So that win total to me was shocking when I saw it at 54.5. I was like, that is way too high. There's a lot of Knicks hype backing up that number. So I would hit the under on that too with you. All right, let's go Charlotte next.
Okay.
I've got Charlotte at 29.5 wins. I'm going over on that, and I feel pretty good about it. First of all, LaMelo looks amazing in the preseason. I know it's only been a couple of preseason games, but he looks good. Everything that you're hearing out of Charlotte is that those ankles are healthy. He's wearing ankle braces now. He's taking care of his body better than ever. Brandon Miller looks really good after a really strong rookie season. They've got Bridges back on the court, which helps them a lot. There's just, and I think Charles Lee has them playing hard and fast in the right way. You look at the years where LaMelo Ball had been healthy, even relatively, played more than 50 games. That's not even, I don't even know if we can consider that healthy, but more than 50 games. The Hornets won 33 games and 43 games. We're not talking about the Hornets being a playoff contender or a finals contender or whatever. All they need to do is clear the bar of 29.5 wins. And as long as LaMelo plays 55, 60 games, I feel like they're going to clear that, especially in an Eastern Conference where there's a lot of wins to be had from like those bottom 4 or 5 teams. I feel really strong about Charlotte going over on this.
So I kind of thought going into the offseason that Charlotte was going to be one of my buy teams, that I was going to be really high on them. And like the number projection I've got on them is 29. So it's right on the number here. It's like just a slight under depending on where you got in the market. There's an over, like it's right on the number. So I think if you kind of make a manual adjustment there and you say, I love Charles Lee and what he's talking about, like bringing those guys to Boston and putting them in the locker room for the finals so that they could be like, this is where we're trying to get to. I think it's such a smart approach. It's such that's like a big level up. And I'm like a Cliff guy. I like Steve Clifford, but Charles Lee, like Cliff, I just think wanted to honestly make it end, I think is how he felt like a lot of the time with that locker room. They've gotten rid of some of the nonsense guys. There's still some nonsense guys there. They had real opportunities to kind of clean out the culture and didn't take it. But I do think it's a better culture that these guys are going into. I think Brandon Miller really does take a step forward this year because he looked very much the part of a star last year. The numbers still say that LaMelo is very good and very impactful. Saying like, oh, as long as they get 60 games from Melo, I mean, we got to be realistic about what we've seen from him. The hesitancy that I honestly have here, again, don't mind it from a basketball standpoint. Not just the fact that I've heard from people in the league, hey, they're willing to take on trades and take on contracts for assets. We're basically willing to I always call it laundering, like launder that cap space so you can get future picks. It's also, if you really pay attention to the conversations that Lee has been and the front office have put out in media day and even this week in preseason, they're managing expectations very heavily. And it's not just like, we want to get better. You could say like, we want to get better. And if that means a play-in berth, like that's a great step for us, but we're not going to put that hard limit on it. Theirs is more of like, wins don't really matter. What matters is getting better. And if you get better, you'll win more. But it makes me like a little nervous that they'll reach a point where they're like, okay, we made progress. Let's load up for next year, but we need to try and get into what is an awesome draft. It's over or nothing for me. I just can't get there enough to be on over. It's a pass.
Totally fair. You're up next.
All right. Let's do an over. And I'm going to take the Dallas Mavericks over 49 and a half.
Yep.
I have them projected at 55. I think this is a 55-win team. I like the division play on them as well. I've softened on the Pelicans a lot, so that's making this play stronger. I think that the Dallas Mavericks were frauds in the playoffs last year. I do. I think that they were frauds. I don't think they should have gotten past OKC. They had outlier shooting performance versus a very young team, got past them, and then got the exact matchup that they needed versus the Wolves. Like, if you want to say, like, well, what did you say at the time? I bet the Mavs to beat the Wolves. Thought they would win that series. They did win that series. Thought they'd get killed by Boston. They got killed by Boston. I don't think they were a legit finals team. However, they did take a lot from that and brought it forward and then just made the team better on paper. So I worry that they've lost a little bit similar to kind of what we talked about with the Knicks, where it's like their late season identity was defense, and Luka does some stuff with PJ Washington and Kyrie hitting threes. They lose a little bit of that in terms of the griminess by moving Derek Jones Jr. Like, that physicality is gone, but Najee Marshall is a better player than Derek Jones Jr. He's just more impactful, and everyone's going to be like, Najee, what about Clay? Clay is very much up and down, but here's the thing. Even with the fact that Clay went 0 of 10 in that playing game, and even with the fact that Clay is pretty much washed defensively at this point, he's still a massive upgrade over their other options. And so you're able to put out more lineups that are more dangerous, limit those kind of things. Do I love the idea of Luka, Kyrie, Clay as a 1-2-3 defensively? No, I do not. But Luka and Kyrie had a 120 offensive rating last year. Now, that sounds really good. 120 points per 100 possessions is awesome. 1.2 points per possession is great, but it's not where you would expect it for what is inarguably a top 3, if not top 2, if not the best offensive player in the league next to Kyrie. So there's still like a lot of room here for them to improve to where they were. And the other key here for me is Derek Lively. Luka has never played with actual rim running lob bigs who could actually defend. It was Dwight Powell, undersized power forward, and stretch 5 Max Strus. They finally gave him the weapons. And forget Kyrie, when Lively and Luka played together last season, 37, 15, 53 win pace. Like, before we get into the upgrades. So for me, this is a no-brainer. Over at 49.5. It's below that 50 key number, below 52.5. This is the kind of team that makes a big jump. I'll take the Mavericks over 49.5.
Yep, I like the over on them too. They won 50 games last year. 2 years ago was the weird year where they traded for Kyrie and everything went to hell. So I kind of crumbled that one out. The year before that, I think they won 53, 54 games. This is a team that with Luka at playing at an MVP level wins 50 games. And they're even better than they've ever been. This is the best supporting cast Luka Doncic has ever had, right? They've got a full season now with Gafford and Derek Lively, who's clearly leveled up. Like, by the finals, he was no longer like a rookie. The guy was playing real basketball. I love the Najee Marshall addition. I think they made some sneaky good additions too. Spencer Dinwiddie, these other guys that they added. I think a lot of people are wondering, okay, well, like, is Najee Marshall going to take Klay Thompson's spot in the starting lineup or maybe the closing lineup or whatever? And I'm wondering, like, does he take PJ Washington's spot in some of these games? You know, PJ Washington, talk about streaky. I don't know that there is a more streaky shooter in the league than PJ Washington at times. And defensively, you know, he's impactful, but he's not elite, right? We're not talking about OG Anunoby here at the 4. We're talking about a degree less than that. And I wonder if there's going to be opportunities for Najee Marshall if he's got the hot hand and PJ Washington doesn't. Maybe he kind of sneaks in there in terms of the closing 5. And I don't even mean that to say like I'm not trying to like degrade PJ Washington for no reason. I'm just saying they've got options now, and I think those options will be really important. And as long as Luka and Kyrie are there, you made some great points on that. So yeah, I like Dallas on the over. I'll go Memphis on the over here. 47.5 wins. It feels like everybody is saying Memphis on the over, and yet it feels like this over under isn't high enough for me to kind of fade that, fade public perception. It's like 47.5. I feel like they're going to clear that as long as they've got John Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. Now, I know Jaren Jackson's dealing with an injury already, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be a long-term thing. So you've got him. You've got Zach Edey, who looked great in that first preseason game. And this might be a little bit of me just being pro Zach Edey, even in the draft. I think he's going to make an impact right away. Brandon Clark is back, which is huge for them. The biggest difference, which I don't think people talk about enough in terms of the difference between this Grizzlies team and the Grizzlies team that was always winning 50 games a year prior to last year's mess, is that they don't have Tyus Jones anymore. And Tyus Jones is a really big part of that team, especially when John Morant missed games. And it's not a matter of if John Morant misses games, it's when John Morant misses games. And they were always able to float themselves when John Morant was out because they had Tyus Jones. I remember talking with the team when they were here in Miami one time, and I was like, why are you guys still good? It was one of those periods where they were without John Morant. I was like, why are you guys still so good without John Morant? And Dylan Brooks, Desmond Bane, and one other player, and I can't remember, said Tyus Jones, all independently in separate independent interviews. And I was like, okay, that made my antennas perk up a little bit. But they have Marcus Smart there, who can obviously do some of that, and I'm hoping that maybe he can kind of help weather the storm when John Morant is out. I think the Grizzlies are awesome. I think they know that they're a 50-win team. I think they're going to try right out the gate to be that 50-win team. I think there's going to be a lot of urgency in Memphis to win a ton of games in the Western Conference and show, hey, we're not last year's team. We're back to what we were. And so all those things combined with better health, I like Memphis over 47.5.
So I love this. I love talking about this number more than I want to bet it. And the reason is what this looks like is that the book said, okay, so they were a 50-win team 2 years ago, 50-plus wins. It's been 2 years. They're getting all these guys back. Those guys should be better. We have injury questions. Last year was such a disaster. And it's not like a 50-50 split between those two outcomes. It's more of like a 70-30. But that's basically what you're saying is if you think that they're as good as they were 2 years ago, this is an easy over. If you think that there's more variance than it was 2 years ago because you don't know chemistry, continuity, and health, given that they were so bad on the health factor last year and are already off to Jaren's banged up, Gigi Jackson's out till January. Everyone freaked out over the jaw thing, and I'm just like, he tweaked an ankle. This is not a big deal. Until they tell me an X-ray was positive, which they haven't. I'm not worried about jaw. Banking on that, I think, is all like questionable, which is enough for me to just kind of be like, I have them over. I just don't know what this is going to look like because there's a lot of assumptions of it's going to go back to what it was.
Right.
And it was 2 years ago. And like chemistry is different and all of those things are a little bit different. It might be better. And if it's better, this is like a 56-win team, wins the division, takes the 1 seed in the West, might be a good title future. There's an opportunity, I think, to bet Memphis later in the season. And that's where I kind of want to be. I don't mind taking the over here. It's just like a very weird spot to try and evaluate. So it's not one that I want to get into, but I totally get why on a basketball side, you want to take the over.
Yeah, I mean, I'm buying everything that the Grizzlies are selling, right? And their basketball fit just makes so much sense, and to me, the proof of concept has already been there. But there's absolutely variance, and all those things that you talked about, and also the West has gotten better than when the Grizzlies were that good. So there's definitely risk baked into that, but like I said, I'm buying what they're selling. You're up next.
All right, let's go to another under, and I'm gonna take the Portland Trailblazers at a very low number at under 22 and
They're on my list. Yeah.
Numbers at this point are not, it's not like profitable to go over. It's not like it is the other way where it's like you should take the highest numbers and go under. It's more, a lot more mixed. There's like a higher, it's, slightly, I think, over historically going back to 2011. But I think a lot of this is just like, does Portland want to win? It's kind of the same question with Utah. The best player on Utah is objectively better than the best player on the Portland Trailblazers. There's no question about that. Lauri Markkanen's better than anybody else on this roster.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the difference between those two teams is 7 wins, which is why I had Utah number 1 on my list here. But Portland doesn't want to win. Like, based off of everybody's conversations, Portland doesn't want to win. And they're in a spot where, given that Scoot Henderson looked so bad last year, and he might have a breakout season, but he looked so bad last year, and they don't have another guy to build around, no matter how people feel about Anthony Simons, that what you want to do here is probably think, if they're in a spot even where they're overperforming expectations, and it's like they have 8 wins by December, and that's going to make this very hard to go under, given how much of the season is left at that point. They're probably pivoting and being like, oh, well, let's move Anthony Simons to the Magic for whatever. Let's go ahead and deal on Denny Avdia, even though I think they really like him as a young player that's going to be very good. Let's move Shaedon Sharpe. They'll start making those types of moves. This is very much just a directionally correct position. Now, I have them projected very low, in part because of the conference that they play in. Their schedule is very difficult. I've got a overall power rating and then one that's based off of who they play and when and where. And their numbers put them right in line with the Brooklyn Nets. The Nets are a much worse team than Portland. They are. They're a much worse team. But Brooklyn plays a much tougher schedule than the Nets do. So I'll take the Portland Trailblazers rather, and I'll take them under 22.5.
I love that number. I had it at 21.5, and I would still take the under. Like, that's not the problem there. They don't want to win. They're not good. The fact that they're debating right now, do we start Scoot Henderson? Do we bring him off the bench? I'm like, what are you guys even talking about? Like, are you purposely trying to be worse? Like, what's even going on here? Just play Scoot Henderson. Let him grow through the growing pains. What are we even doing? That's a great number. I'm going to do the same thing basically with Washington. I have him here at 20.5, and I'm slamming that under. I don't understand. The Washington Wizards won 15 games last year. I don't know what they did over the offseason to suggest that they're 5 or 6 or 7 wins better than that. Like, yeah, they added Jonas Valanciunas. Cool. Sick, dudes. Like, that's great. Like, they got rid of Tyus Jones, who was the only adult in that room. And everything out of Washington that you hear is, Jordan Poole has taken that next step, and he's ready to cede control of take the reins of the offense. We're going to let him be the point guard. There should just be alarms going off everywhere in Washington. Jordan Poole running your offense. Jordan Poole has entered that territory of the Summer Epiphany Club, where there's just a group of players that every summer they come back more serious, more mature. They're taking care of their bodies. They hired a dietitian, like whatever. Like Zion's in this club. Like there's a bunch of guys in this club, but the Summer Epiphany Club. Ben Simmons is like the founder of the club. He's like the king of the club. Jordan Poole is in that club now. When he's running that offense, it's not going to work, and they don't have the backup anymore. Like, they don't have that option of, actually, we're just going to give it to Tyus Jones. We're going to bring Jordan Poole off the bench like they did at the end of last year. There's not an option for that. They're going to go wherever Jordan Poole takes them, and I don't think that he's taken them to 21 wins. They're also a trade candidate team, right? Jonas Valanciunas probably traded before February anyway. Kyle Kuzma might get traded too. Malcolm Brogdon got hurt. Like, that would be the one guy that could have taken controls, and now he's injured. And by the way, he's probably gonna get injured again this year. That's just sort of what Malcolm Brogdon does. So I don't know what, again, suggests that this team is gonna win 5, 6, 7 more games than they won last year. I'm slamming the under on them.
My only hesitation here, a big factor for wanting to take an under when totals are this low, is you need to look at how many NBA players do they have? And you go like, well, they're all in the NBA, Matt. No. What I mean by that is, in 3 years, how many of these guys are still going to be in the league? If you ask me about Portland, that number gets very low. If you ask me about Brooklyn, it gets even smaller. Washington, unfortunately, it's like, well, Brogdon's probably going to be in the league in 3 years, even though he's hurt all the time. Jordan Poole's an interesting one. If you look at his season last year and you kind of track all of the relevant stats from game 81 to game 82, you're going to notice that like the last 30 games of the season, there was a pretty positive turn for Jordan Poole. Mm-hmm. Now, that's March basketball, which everyone that has followed any of my work should know that I completely think is nonsense. But it is kind of meaningful to me that like if you're able to make at least that improvement, it shows that you got, like you said, more serious maybe by the season's end. And I do think that Jordan Poole is a little bit of a buy low candidate player where it's like, look, he did contribute to a championship team. He did have good things about his game. And absolutely, I think he was a train wreck last year and they should not be just running the offense through him. But like Kuzma, Poole, Brogdon, Valanciunas. There are NBA guys on this roster, which makes me like a little nervous. It's not like I'm like, oh, love the over. They're definitely going to win 25 games, because they also should reach a point where they're just like, we need to win 14 games. Like, that's how many we need to win, or however many it takes to get in the top 4. The issue here, I think, is like there is kind of like a floor here for how bad you can be, because if you're top 4, you're in a pretty good spot for the odds. And so if it's like Brooklyn, Portland, insert whatever other team, Utah or any of the other candidates that you want into that bottom tier, right? Washington can still make the top 4 lottery odds at like 23. And then you lose this one pretty close. I definitely agree that the bulk of the outcomes are under here. It's just like not exciting enough to get me on board. I already have a bet on them at a higher number. The market's also moved this because everybody's like, oh, they're going to be awful, to a point where now I'm kind of like, I'm good.
They're definitely one of those teams that by February could look around at Utah, Portland, Brooklyn and be like, we actually have to get way worse than what we are.
Yep.
And maybe just sell off all of it. But there's a surprising amount of teams that I feel pretty good about going under in this range. Like you mentioned, Portland, Washington. Brooklyn's at 18.5. I don't know if you have them on your list. That's really low, even though it is the worst roster in the NBA. But that's still a really low amount of games to feel good about betting either side of it. But yeah, you have the next pick.
Okay. This is where it starts to get tough. All right, I'm not going to be bold here. I'm going to instead go with a safer pick and save another one. I'm going to take the Boston Celtics over 58.5. Now I got done saying like, hey, you shouldn't take top 3 ranked teams. And hey, you shouldn't take teams over 52.5 wins. I just can't get to a spot where this isn't a team that wins 60 games again. I just can't get there because they have the best redundancy. Oh no, Kristaps Porzingis is out for a while. What are they going to do if Al Horford's hurt? You seen Xavier Tillman? Because it looks like he can fill in not only in the regular season, but in the freaking finals. So I think they're going to be okay. Oh, Jaylen Brown needs a night off. Well, that's a shame. Good thing that they still have Derek White, Andrew Holiday, and Sam Hauser will fill in pretty well. They don't have a ton of depth. When we start getting into the Peyton Pritchard range, I'm kind of like, I don't know. I know the numbers were good, but I'm still nervous there. But it's good enough in redundancy, and their other guys are so good. They're also just like such a solid team in terms of process. Maybe the championship makes them back off a little bit. But one of the things I really like about this team over the past 3 seasons, from Udoka through the 2 years of Missoula, is that they are one of the most prepared teams night by night in the NBA. A lot of these teams, they come in and it's like, we got in at 2. This is our 3rd night on playing in 4 nights. We went out the other night, and they're just like not prepared to play. Mm-hmm. The Celtics are almost always prepared to play. Like the number of games where they just quote unquote don't have it is so small. And that level of play is a lot of what gives me like reinforcement here, where I'm like, what if like a lot goes wrong relatively for them? What does this track out at? And it's like, I don't know, 54, which is within range of this win total anyway. It's a high number. I get it. And I don't love taking it, but last year their number was the highest on the board. I took the over and it cruised. I'll take them again at 58.5.
I got the over on them as well. You already mentioned like the effort there. It's obviously there. I don't think there's going to be that championship hangover like, we don't need the regular season anymore, because everything Joe Mazzulla is talking about, I love it. I love everything he's talking about in terms of target on our backs, and we need to give the most effort. And that guy, I don't think he has it in him to not coach this team hard. And Jason Tatum with his Olympic experience, Jaylen Brown finding a perceived slight in literally everything that exists. Like this team has a chip on its shoulder. And I also think with what Mazzulla is talking about in terms of being honest with the team, hey, the Celtics are up for sale. We don't know how much longer we're going to be able to stay together. We got to go for it again. We have a chance to repeat here. I think all the messaging is right for this Boston Celtics team. Now, I think most people might look at this over-under and say, well, Kristaps Porzingis is hurt. I'm going to back off. Porzingis only played 57 games last year, and they cleared this number easily. So even if he plays 50, 57, 60 games this year, they could still get past this number. I don't know that the top of the East got harder, but the Celtics are still the best team in the top of the East. They should still have a winning record against those teams. And the bottom of the East, you could argue, even got worse this year. So there's still plenty of wins on the board to just kind of collect and stack wins. So, yeah, I think the health doesn't really hurt them. I think their effort's going to be there. The math always helps them
Yeah.
Like they're just going to win the math battle every single night. All of this stuff just equals regular season wins machine. And I think the Celtics are that.
A few more numbers there.
Let's do
They
it.
were 21-4 with Kristaps Porzingis out
Right.
last year.
Right.
Like 21-4 without him. And this is my favorite one because this is just shows you how like you don't have to expect them to repeat this. Think about how big the drop off is. They had 42 double-digit wins. Half of their season, over half of their season, they won by double digits.
Mm-hmm.
That's the margin of error they're playing with here. So yeah, I think it's an over.
They're dominant. Yeah, Porzingis, that whole aspect, he's the ceiling raiser. We saw that in the NBA Finals, just like the way that he flips matchups and all those things. In terms of a floor raiser, he's barely that. Like, he has almost nothing to do with the floor. As long as you've got Derek White, Drew Holiday, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown out on the perimeter, your rim protection is going to be fine. You could put Xavier Tillman or Luke Cornett back there and still be a top 10 defense with those guys on the floor. And that's not even with, talking about Al Horford, who's legitimately good. So, yeah, Boston I feel really strongly about. That was your pick. I'll go Denver next. 50.5 wins is what I have at the over-under. They won 57 wins. They won 57 games, 2 years ago, 53 last year, unless I have that flipped. I can't read my handwriting.
It's 57 last year.
Yeah, and then 53 the year before that. This team wins 50-plus games. I know they lost KCP. You can't convince me that KCP is worth that many wins. You just can't. As long as you got Nikola Jokic, I think the depth will be is a problem. I think it's more of a problem in the playoffs. I just think that this team is good. I think that you've still got enough chemistry with Jokic, Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., obviously Jamal Murray. I think Jamal Murray's going to have a bounce-back year. They're well coached with Michael Malone. This is a team that, even if you doubt their championship ceiling because of some of the moves they made, their whole thing is built on being stable. And I think their stability sort of is a 50-win floor. So I'll take Denver going over.
I'm on the other side of you here.
Really?
Their under is one of my biggest plays on the season. Now, this has moved down. It was 52.5 when I grabbed it. 51.5. I still lean that way, but won't play it. I do think you're kind of right that this a big number in your favor. Not counting 2020, which COVID season, that counts as voided most of the time. Every other season under Michael Malone, they've gone over. Every single one, no matter how good they are, no matter what the expectation is, no matter how much these numbers get steamed, they go over. They outperform expectation. My only thing here is we're really getting to the bottom of the barrel in terms of how good can you put around Jokic and still win 50 games. It is this kind of battle of if you have Jokic and he plays 70 games, which he doesn't miss hardly any time ever, knock on wood, they win 50. You're right. But you're replacing KCP, a proven vet, elite shooter, great defensive player, with Christian Brown, might be a good shooter, really good defender, much more inexperienced. The bench, if Jamal Murray misses a game, here's the point guard rotation. Russell Westbrook, I guess Julian Strawther plays backup point.
Strawther minutes, yep.
And like Strawther's going to play a lot this year. Peyton Watson's going to play a lot this year because of the roster construct. They're very high on Dario Saric. They feel really good about him, but he does get banged up. He's coming off a major injury 2 seasons ago, but he's really impressed the guys in camp. Part of their problem is that they really do they have to get time off for these guys. They know they had to deal with the fact that they were gassed last year because they tried to push through the rest of the regular season. They thought they could just push through and get the 1 seed. And then they got caught by the Spurs. So they got neither. They didn't get the 1. And they were gassed, and it ran out in that Wolves series at the end of it. So what you wind up here with is a very tough balance for develop the young guys, win a lot of games, and get rest. That's all I think really worrisome. I don't love the under here anymore because it's like, do I really want to bet for them to win fewer than 50 games, which is like a decent threshold versus where this is at? At 51.5, I think it's a stay away. At 52.5, I feel quite a bit better because it gives you they could win 50 or 51 or 52 right. And you still cash. They're worse than they were last year. That's objectively true. I think it's an under or nothing, but I understand anyone that doesn't want to go against Yoke.
Yep. You're the next pick.
All right. You took the team that I cover on a podcast, so I'm going to take the team that you cover on a podcast.
Okay.
I'm taking the under on the Miami Heat. My favorite kind of derivative bet here is them to miss the playoffs at 360 plus 360.
And we're done with our time here. It was good to have you, Matt.
Look, I think Bam Adebayo is the best defender in the NBA, and I think Eric Spoelstra is the best coach in the NBA. This is a play on two things. One, they also are hitting the bottom of the barrel in terms of how much can you reasonably replace with development, and I don't trust Jimmy Butler. That's the two things that go into this. From a development standpoint, the Raptors were like this team that we were all like, God, look at this. Like, they're just a factory. OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam and Scotty Barnes, hit after hit after hit. And then it was like, oh, like Chris Boucher's a miss. And like, oh, this other guy's a miss. And like, oh, Lionel Banton's probably not a guy. And like, it's just very hard to keep plugging those guys in. Now, they'll still perform. I still don't think that this team will be awful. But I do think that where they're at in the market, kind of expecting them to be a little bit better, there's a 46.5 still in the market for them. That's too high. I think they're much closer to 500. Jimmy, I paid a lot of attention to Heat podcasts. I listened to very good ones hosted by some individuals on this particular one. And I listened to other ones from around that market, and I pay attention to their fans. They have smart fans. And everybody last year was like, look, I love Jimmy, but. And there was like a lot of that. It was, I love Jimmy, but. There was, when is playoff Jimmy going to show up? And he just never did. And then he was hurt. And it's like, why is he at the Miami Open instead of like helping these guys out? And he's in a lame duck season with his contract expiring. And everyone's like, no, everyone's being mature and fine about it. I'm like, yeah, because things really end well wherever Jimmy Butler goes. Before he leaves, it's always very non-dramatic and calm. I don't like that combination. That's enough combined with like where I'm at now. Like Jovic and Jaime, I like a lot as players and they can make leaps here. But the rest of the roster, I think, is just a bunch of guys. Duncan was so good last year, Duncan Robinson. I have a hard time expecting him to be that good. Kevin Love's a year older. He was so good last year. A lot of the guys that held them up last year, I think it's hard to expect a repeat performance from them, and they have injury issues consistently. So I'm willing to take an under on them at 46.5.
So you found a 46.5. I looked it up. I had 44.5.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a pretty dramatic difference.
It is.
And so I had them as an over, but I think you and I are kind of saying the same things, just we're reacting to different lines here. Everything you said about Jimmy Butler is right. And I think a lot of people, well, he's in a contract year, so he's going to be motivated to have a big year and get that next big contract. And yeah, he's going to be motivated. He's also 35 years old. He's never healthy in the regular season. And players at 35 years old don't typically get healthier and better as they get older, right? Like, that's not how this usually works. And so he could be motivated all he wants. I'm motivated, right? It doesn't matter. Like, I could be as motivated as I want to win NBA MVP or the French Open. I'm not going to do it. It's not going to matter. You have to have the ability to do it. And Jimmy Butler's body has broken down. He's simply not the same guy. Even when he was playing last year, averaging fewer dunks per game, fewer rebounds, fewer steals, like everything was at a low last year. And by the way, not to gloss over this, like, it was revealed in that Netflix series that he was dealing with the loss of his father during the season. But like, again, not trying to gloss over it or belittle it, that was in February. He wasn't good already before that. So there's, and obviously he was dealing with his dad being in the hospital and stuff, but there was just literal physical signs that we could tell. And again, he's 35 years old. But to push back on you a little bit here, they won 46 games last year, having as many injuries as the Memphis Grizzlies and the Portland Trailblazers, right? Like, they were the most, they had more games lost due to injury than any other team in the playoffs last year. This is never a healthy team, but they're never that unhealthy either. Like, they're not going to be Boston Celtics OKC level healthy this year, but maybe if they find something in the middle, they're just going to get more wins that way in terms of just being healthier. And they still have Eric Spoelstra, who's just going to probably win them 4, 5, 6 games in the last 3 minutes of a game that they have no business winning, right? Like, the Heat just kind of find ways to win these games sometimes. They also find ways to lose some of these games sometimes, but I have them over at 44.5. You have them under at 46.5, and we might be like, it might be the sweet spot is right in between those two things is where they end up here.
Yeah. And like, I project them lower, but like, 40, if it's once you're at 44.5, I'm kind of like, I'm probably good there.
The one thing I do like from them in this preseason so far, not to go on a whole like Miami Heat thing here, because I do that enough, but they were losing the math battle last year just by design, like the opposite of the Boston Celtics. I'm not sure anybody told the Heat that mid-range shots are the most inefficient shot. They just found out. So in the preseason so far, and everything that we've heard out of training camp and everything, is that they're going to play a little bit more spaced out, shoot more threes, limit the limit the mid-range shots. In training camp, they were rewarding 3-pointers for shots at the rim and 3 points for 3-pointers and 1 point for mid-range shots. Like, they are driving it home right now, which I love. And they have the personnel to do it. That's the thing. Like, Jimmy, Bam notwithstanding, Bam's taking like 10 3-pointers a game now. Tyler Hero's an elite 3-point shooter. Terry Rozier gets them up at high volume to the point where it works for the math. And they obviously still have Duncan Robinson, who's a lead 3-point shooter. So I think they've got guys there. Again, you and I are probably falling in the same place here. We're just reacting to different lines. I'll go. I'm going to go to the Lakers next. 42.5 is where I have it. I thought, based on everything that we're hearing from the Lakers, is that it was even worse under Darvin Ham than we thought last year. That guy might have cost them 10 wins. I don't know. Maybe 10 might be a lot, but cost them quite a few wins. They won 47 games last year. That was with a very good, healthy season from LeBron, a very good health season from Anthony Davis. But it just, under JJ Redick, it feels like they're more engaged. It feels like, this is not even a pro JJ Redick thing. It might just be like addition by subtraction of getting Darvin Ham out of there. And if you just do that, play the right lineups, it's really hard to me to not go over 42.5 wins when you still have two of the top 10 players in the league in LeBron and AD. There's enough depth there. D'Angelo Russell is going to go off for, 10 games a year and just score like 28 points out of nowhere and help win you a game. Austin Reeves, same thing. That guy's a solid player. There's enough talent on that roster. The depth is a little shaky, but I think the high-end stuff is enough. And it's a starting five that does fit together. And if they start taking more threes and start prioritizing defense a little bit more, and if just the vibes, like LeBron James teams are very reliant on vibes. If the vibes are just better, again, by the virtue of Darvin Ham's out, JJ Redick's in, Bronny James is here, everybody's happy about it, including the guy that's in charge of all of this with LeBron James. If he's happy, everybody sort of follows him, and the vibes continue. So I like the Lakers. I think this is a pretty low line, so I like the Lakers going over.
It's you and me on Lakers over Island, Wes. Everybody else thinks this is an under or a no play based off of the health of LeBron and AD last year. So I think the vibe stuff is relevant. Jovan Bua talked about, he's written about this over at The Athletic, about how this is like the best vibes he's ever been around with the Lakers, which I think is significant. A lot of this is tough because everyone starts with, look, LeBron and AD played so many games last year. Do you really think that's going to happen again? That team told you consistently over and over and over again their problem was health with the other guys, and they had no continuity. I'm not saying it's easier to win if you have Rui Hachimura and Gabe Vincent than if you have Anthony Davis. What I am telling you is, like, your average possession by possession gets a lot harder and your curve gets a little bit sharper. And if you're able to get those guys and get AD and LeBron, even if they miss different games, you're still pretty good. I think Ham got a little bit of a rotten deal, but everyone is very insistent he was the worst. Rui was hurt for the beginning of the season, and then he was coming off the bench, and Ham wasn't getting to the good lineups. That is a definite problem. When LeBron, AD, and Rui played in lineups together in a game, they had a 50-win pace.
Yep.
That to me is extremely significant, even if we say that we're going to see regression from LeBron and AD on a health standpoint. And that's likely to happen. But if the overall performance of the collective five-man unit is better, do I love it with D'Angelo Russell still being there? No. If they just replaced D'Lo with almost anybody, I'd feel a lot better about it. But this is what they got. Austin Reeves should have a bounce-back season after being really pretty awful last year across the board. Some of his numbers were wild in terms of impact. They just lost his minutes regardless. He's playing as more natural position now. Mm-hmm. They know what they want from him. It seems like the best thing I think that JJ might be able to do here is optimize them. Is just, if you just take away some of the inefficiency and this is the best version we can get, then that's enough to probably get them over this number at 42.5. Even if they're not a juggernaut, even if they're just like a play-in team at 46 wins, you're still okay here. So with this number having gone down all the way to 42.5, I'm with you. I will caution, my one piece of caution here is I looked at teams that perform in the 75th percentile or better in 3-point game performance. What I mean by that is not 3-pointers. I mean, if you're in a game that's decided by 3 points or less, so you won your close games. Lakers were dominant in those games last season. They were 75th percentile in both the number of games that they won within 3 points and their winning percentage in those games. Those teams go under at about 65% the following season. Mm-hmm. That's one of the few categories where there is regression. it's just not enough for me to go under on this team, and I do think that over is the right play.
That's a really interesting number, and not that I'm sure you don't have this in front of you, but like I wonder how many of the teams that didn't regress were LeBron James teams.
Probably.
You know what I mean? So it's like it's but yeah, 42 and a half to me is just way too low for this. And it's almost the opposite of everything we were talking about. It's really easy to hate the Lakers. They're the most hated team in the NBA. And they deserve it, frankly, for the way that they act sometimes. But 42 and a half is way too low. Give me one more, and then we'll probably go to our next segment here.
All right, I'm going to take the Detroit Pistons. I'm going to take them over 25.
Wow, okay.
24 and a half in the market. There still should be one of those. I think is still a 24 and a half. I'm looking that up right now.
I have 25 and a half, but I'm
yeah,
sure
20. It's moved up. 25 and a half. I'll take the 25 and a half. I have them at 29. Okay, so here's how this looks. We talked about like NBA players, right? About how many NBA players do you actually have on roster? The Pistons added actual NBA players. Mm-hmm. They added Tobias Harris, who you can hate the contract that he was on in Philly and hate X, Y, and Z, and he didn't step up. He is an NBA player. He produces. He is able to hit threes. He is able to score off the bounce, and he rebounds. Tobias is an NBA player. Malik Beasley, miscast as a defensive stopper in Milwaukee. That was an awful fit for him. He is a pure three-point shooter, spacer. He is an NBA player. He has proven he is an NBA player at this point. Cade made a real jump in terms of his jumper last season, and I know that the numbers in preseason have not been good, but I have to trust that the overall jumper will get back to where it needs to be, and his shot creation is better. Most notably, actually, I've seen him make a few layups in preseason, which is really nice to see because his finishing last year was abysmal. Like I said, when we're talking about preseason stuff, when you go back and you watch, it seemed like Monty Williams either didn't care or his instructions were basically, hey, we want to see if you can just beat these guys one-on-one to evaluate what we need to do. Go out there and just try and beat him in ISO. That's not Cade's game. And him trying to beat Jaden McDaniels off the dribble is not a way for you to produce efficient offense. But putting him in pick and roll situations with Duren, Stewart, or Paul Reed, who everyone is raving about there, is a very good way to create leverage and then get the ball moving. Jaden Ivey looks like he's going to be better. JB Bickerstaff, here's a big key. The Pistons were bottom in location effective field goal percentage last season. They were not good in those categories. They didn't take efficient shots. Monty Williams doesn't stress that. JB Bickerstaff's teams have been top 10 every single year under Cleveland. So even if they don't hit them, they're going to take better value shots. That's just going to raise the offensive floor. So I don't think this team is going to like when we start to be like a team this much, which I do. This is my biggest play, honestly, based off of where I got originally, which was much lower. When we start to do that, it's like, well, how good could they be? Maybe I'll take like a play-in or a playoff. No, I just want the over. The play here is the Pistons are not going to be awful. And the idea is like, well, what if they tank about like all these other teams that you do? I legitimately believe that the front office made decisions based off of not doing that. That this team seems like we can't lose anymore, man. Like the culture of losing is just too bad. If we get Flag or Ace Bailey, great. But like we have Cade Cunningham, who we believe in. We need to win some freaking games. So I do think that they'll compete all the way through the end. And I like the over here at 25 and a half.
So you're definitely right about that culture of losing. 14, 17, and 23 wins over the last 3 seasons. That's really bad. So again, I have them here at 25 and a half. I have a hard time going over that because they won 14 games last year. I'm asking 11, 12 more wins than they were last year. Second worst net rating in the league. It's not that just they lost a lot of games. It's that they lost a lot of games by a lot of points.
Yep.
So even if they get better, they got to get better enough to where those L's swap to W's.
Yep.
And that's the part where I just stop short. I love everything. Like, look at us talking about the Pistons twice in one podcast. I love everything about the process. I love the lineups that JB Bickerstaff is putting out. They make sense. Like, there's not a lot of spacing on this roster, but he's optimizing the spacing that it has with the limitations that the roster has, right? You've got Cunningham and Ivy out there with one shooter. In the 2 preseason games, it was either Beasley or Tim Hardaway Jr. He swapped the 2. Fontecchio and then Jalen Duren with the vertical spacing that he provides. Tobias Harris hasn't played because of illness in these first 2 games. He's obviously a floor spacer as well that they have. I think there's ways to optimize this roster. I like a lot of what they're doing. I think they're going to win more games. Getting all the way up to over 25 and a half is a little bit of a muscle for me that I don't have, but I respect it. So, all right, last thing here. We talked about the teams that we like in terms of over-unders. What's your number one stay away?
There's a lot
that I haven't talked about, at least. Yeah.
There's a lot that I think I'm nervous about. I think probably my number one stay away is, gosh, it's actually probably the Pacers.
Mm.
Should be a little bit of regression. Should be a little bit of a. They weren't necessarily as good as that postseason run showed. There should be a little bit of a balance. Like they went from being an unbelievable offense to being an awesome defense. Offense rather. I think they were still the best offense in the league, even after that kind of balance, and even with Boston. Like Boston statistically was number one, but Joe Mazzulla's comments on Locked On Celtics kind of like showed a little bit of like when he said the Pacers were their toughest matchup.
Mm-hmm.
They're so good offensively, it sets a really high floor, and I think they'll be awesome again. But getting to this kind of number, I think, is a little bit of an inflated figure here with where it's at in the market, 46.5, 47.5 in that range. That's a lot. Like that's just like a lot of wins for a still pretty young team that Halliburton's had injury histories. The reason that it's a stay away though is like, look, they might bounce the defense from bottom 10 to 19th while still having a top 5 offense. And now all of a sudden, like this is an easy one. Like their upside is really high.
Mm-hmm.
There was a preseason video I've shared several times, which is Pascal Siakam talking to the young guys that he invited out to his gym, and they were working out in the summer, and it was him with like a long speech about we didn't do anything, we haven't done anything. Like don't be thinking that we're just going to be right back there, because I thought that, and I haven't sniffed the finals since. And so that messaging is such a good leadership quality. You got internal development for guys like Benedict Mathurin, who's back, or guys like Jarris Walker, who should take a step forward. There's so many guys I like. Rick Carlisle's a great coach. I cannot go under, but I also really don't want to bank on everything going right. And for an over here, they're like the opposite of the Mavericks, where if they made big moves to bolster the defense, I'd be in, but they didn't. So I'm going to go ahead and stay away on that one.
Yeah, getting the first thing you hear out of Indiana is, well, we got a full year of Pascal Siakam. History shows that that doesn't matter that much. And the Pacers got off to a blazing start. It wasn't like they were bad at the beginning of last season. They were awesome at the beginning of last season. They're going to be that much better at the pre-trade deadline than they were last year. I don't know. And so that's not enough. If you just closed your eyes and didn't even look at the over-unders or never looked at them and said, how many games do you think the Pacers win this year? I think most people would hedge and say 47. Right?
Yep.
And the over-under is right there. It's at 47.5. I mean, we're right at the tipping point of that. I think Vegas nailed it with this one. And so I'm with you. It's a stay away. They might win 47 wins, and that still comes in at the under, and they might be awesome. I think they're going to be top 5 in offensive rating. I did a show a couple weeks ago. I think they're probably going to be number 1 or number 2 in offensive rating this season. Their floor is that high on that end. I still have questions about their defense. There's still some health questions, and you're absolutely right. Sometimes with these young guys, you just really never know how they're going to respond. My number 1 stay away is the San Antonio Spurs at 35.5 wins.
Yep.
There is so much freaking hype on the Victor, and this is my whole thing about NBA Twitter is that we can't have nice things. NBA analysts, we just can't have nice things. We can't just be like, Victor Wembanyama is the next guy. He's the next whatever. It doesn't mean that they have to be in the playoffs right away. And you've got everybody hot taken away, being like, you know what about the Spurs? I actually think they're going to make the playoffs. That's not the hot take anymore. The hot take about the Spurs is that they're still going to be bad. And Victor Wembanyama is probably a top 15 player in the NBA right now, top 20, wherever you want to put him. This is not a Wemby take. It's the rest of the roster. You start looking at that roster and the depth, and you're like, there's just not that much here, right? I like Chris Paul. I like Harrison Barnes for them. I like adding the veterans, showing the young guys the ropes, adding some professionalism to that group. I think they're going to win, obviously, more games than they won last year. And when Victor Wembanyama is on the court, this team is dominant. And if he's playing 33 minutes a game, this team is going to win games. I just don't know how many games they're going to win, and that's why it's a stay away from me. I could see them winning 36, 37, 38, 40 games. I could see it. I don't want to doubt Victor Wembanyama. That's part of it. He's that good. He's that guy already. But there's not a lot going on in this roster beyond Wemby. And that's the part that freaks me out a little bit. And we're only a year into this. I don't know if Victor Wembanyama is going to deal with injury issues. I have no idea. But everybody who's ever had anything close to his body type has. And that's scary. And so I just can't get there to bet either way on the Spurs because I just still don't have enough information. 35.5. It feels like it should be an easy over because everybody wants to love the Spurs and love Wemby, but it's definitely not.
See, I'm of the opposite opinion where it feels like an easy under. This team's not really going to make that big of a leap. Come on. But
and then you start thinking,
the key here is after All-Star, and I could go back to January, that's really when they started to get good.
Yep.
They won at a 33 win pace, which is not good, but you're also like, all right, 33 wins. This is at 36 and a half.
Plus Chris Paul, plus Harrison Barnes, plus another Wemby leap.
Well, that last part's the problem, because I don't know how to like. You make an estimated guess on what you think internal improvement's going to be. Like, okay, I'll bump them up by 1.5 points on power rating. That's a pretty good improvement. 2 points. I don't know what to do with them.
Right.
Do I upgrade him 4 points on power rating, which is like 9 wins?
Right.
Like, do I? How good could he be? Like, is he a top player in the league?
Right.
Like, there's no way to really adequately account, especially because one of the things is, if you look, his defensive impact way out measures what you actually. Now, his block rate's insane, right? He picks up all these blocks, but when you actually like watch him, he's out of position, or like Embiid and Jokic just throw him around. Like, they just give him a shoulder bump and bumped him out of the way. But he gained 25 pounds of muscle in the offseason, muscle watch.
Right.
Like, there's no way for me to try and encapsulate, to quantify what I expect from Victor Wembanyama. I just have to wait and see. Throw in the fact that Savon Castle looks really good in preseason play, and I'm a little bit higher on the rest of the supporting roster. I like Selhan a lot. He made some real strides once he wasn't having to play point guard.
Mm-hmm.
There's bounce back opportunity, I think, for Keldon Johnson. They're not trying actively to like sabotage the team like they did the first half of the year for a number of reasons.
The Devin Vassell injury makes me a little queasy there.
Yeah, but also, like, really, we're gonna bump this win total up this much.
Yeah,
they're gonna be close to a 500, because it's like a 36 and a half. It's like a couple more, and you're at 40. You think they're gonna be in that range? Like, that's just so much for a team that started at nothing and added 2 guys who, quite honestly, like, Chris is nearing the end, and Harrison was objectively bad last year. Like, the Kings fans were adamant about how bad Barnes was defensively. So when you add a veteran, you expect the defense to get better, but I'm not sure that's true. But again, no way am I taking this under. Have you seen Victor Wembanyama? There's no way. So yeah, it's a definite stay away.
Every lineup that Wemby is in is like, this is a title team. And then when he's off the court, this team is the worst in the league. And it's just so hard to parse all those things. Like we said, like there's the eye test, there's the math, and then there's the logic and all these things. It's too much. And there's 29 other over-unders to bet on. Just bet on those. Stay away from this first thing. Be on the Wemby hype train. You don't have to put your money on it necessarily. All right. That'll do it for us today, Matt. Thanks so much for joining me on today's show. You can find Matt's work over at the Action Network. You can find him on the Locked On Podcast Network. For now, that'll do it for us today. We'll see you next week.